I do not move from my seat at all unless I need to go use the restroom. That's it, okay? I never move from my seat while I'm sitting around waiting for the girl to come to me. Because that's all I do there. I just wait for a girl to come talk to me.
Right now we are in the absolute worst situation. My PC broke and I can't access my clipchamp file to any other computer. So I'll have to wait and do something else instead. How about we discuss quote-unquote ugly video games? I don't really think today's video games are ugly at all, even the AAA market ones. Their art direction is more realistic, thus a bit more stinky, although the weird plastic surgery faces of the Final Fantasy are still there after all of these years. Even Tecmo Koei, as well as all of these other games, have this kind of art style. Tecmusi Koiyuuki. While Naughty Dogs as well as other things have more realistic facial features. That style of realism often doesn't appeal to me. I have grown up watching American and Hollywood movies, so seeing games imitate that style to a T, I just don't care that much. You need to do something interesting with the realism to make me care about it. Or just make it teen drama, or FMV. Full motion video is a technique used to integrate video footage into video games. It was used in the 90s for PC titles and later down the line consoles. I am not sure why it happened, but maybe more people wanted games to be like movies. Either way, it can look either fine or look kinda weird. It's clear most of these productions feel like low-budget movies, while the sprites used for these models are so compressed it can look doubtful. But there is a beauty in this awfulness, in my opinion, especially when it comes to more horrifying imagery, and why Mortal Kombat looks so uncanny. These are real people, but they're so deformed it looks creepy, while the violence feels real, yet over the top at the same time. There is a charm to all Mortal Kombat games, as well as the ugliness of FMV titles. Honestly, it feels like this hardware deserves to be preserved for its ugliness, so that we can appreciate and maybe laugh at it, very least a little bit. FMV games eventually evolved to the point where Square Enix decided to make one, again, while the indies also used it for horror games, sort of. I enjoy how ugly it looks, maybe more than I enjoy GBA games. Time to put some CG renders and compress them as weird sprites. Like it's Donkey Kong Country. It worked for Donkey Kong Country, might as well work for us. Aside from the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, very few GBA titles managed to use these sprites convincingly. So what we get is Crash Bandicoot CG sprites, ported from PS1, barely chugging along with a compressed background. While I'm not a fan of how it looks kinda cheap, some people will feel like they're playing a new PS1 Crash game. Very Activision moment. Meanwhile, Isaac uses these CG sprites in a very creative way, to the point where it looks like Wild Arms overworld sprites. These cute chibi sprites that represent very detailed characters. Does it look weird compared to modern JRPGs where you can see the characters in their entirety? Yes! It has a certain amount of charm due to the way everyone acts and speaks. very expressive, especially for a GBA title. Mostly prefer pixel art, so I'm not saying this is automatically prettier, so whatever. Beauty is a preference anyways. A legendary game developer WayForward made Unfabulous, which I can understand what they were going for. NBA Jam likes faces on characters like Angela Anaconda. However, it looks sort of creepy here. I want to see WayForward try this again, honestly. I know they won't, but a mixed media project like this sounds dope. Maybe even an horror game. Oni certainly used the ugliness of its weird enemies to create the tension, so if WayForward could do this, they would. Certainly doubt they will though. Certainly doubt it the same way I doubt Sonic Team will ever make a game as uncanny as SAE1. Even the GameCube version somehow looks more natural. Aside from 1 or 2 frames, even Sonic Shuffle looks a bit more natural, because its animation slash facial movement looks so dang unhinged. Sonic Adventure looks weird. I would argue it makes the game more memorable since it shows the impact of early 3D games. But no, not now. Before I tackle early 3D games, I mentioned Sonic, so might as well talk about how I despise Sonic Riders. The trick system annoys me, the controls are kinda fine, even floatier than the Sonic Heroes or something. The graphics are just... This could be made in Gmod now that I think about it. The thing about the writing is that this is the most BS shonen tournament arc this side of Captain Tsubasa, while the writers decided to add Looney Tunes slapstick humor, but due to the hardware limitations, the expressive characters look like this. Sonic Riders is a special case of ugliness. The thing is that most advertisements and official game artwork doesn't look like this. Instead looks like the coolest thing ever. It's comparable to The World Ends With You or Sonic Battle. But yeah, the way the game advertises its coolness is misleading, since the anime intro looks so flashy compared to whatever this is. I'd rather have a cel-shaded look, but the game was probably heavily rushed, so oof. In my opinion, this could have looked much better despite the neat futuristic environments. However, I am willing to say that, again, in my opinion, Ape Escape Pumped and Primed managed to pull off something like Sonic Riders better. Characters are expressive, the environments are beautiful, everything looks absolutely natural. Also a tournament shonen arc, but honestly I think the writing here is a lot better due to the lore it has. But that's discussed in that Ape Escape video I made, so okay. Now though, we need to talk about early 3D games. 3D titles can look incredibly unhinged, but again, it depends. Raiders models fit perfectly with the tent atmosphere it has, while maybe Tekken's characters look special. Tomb Raider knows its limitations, while Tekken tries surpassing them, sort of looking ugly in the process. Virtua Fighter almost does the same thing, but it doesn't have the CG. CG cutscenes were all over PlayStation 1 Saturn and looked cool back then. Probably. Just that the PS1 was cheap and easy to develop for, so any game could get a fancy opening cutscene to make the player invested in its world. Yes, Final Fantasy VII has this CG type of cutscenes. So does Klonoa, and no one can stop Mr. Domino. Probably the most immersive of experiences. It also kind of made up for the PS1's graphical shortcomings, mostly to make the game's graphics look prettier than they actually are. Market mostly the CG cutscenes in the commercial. Simpler titles like Jumping Flash did not need that many cutscenes while its graphics looked incredibly surreal. Yes, it is an early 3D game for a new console, so the models look incredibly simple, but almost surreal. Due to that, it leaves a lot of things up to the imagination, sort of like a 3D version of an NES game. The frame rate could use improvements, which probably happened in the sequel. Truth be told, Super Mario 64 as well as Crash's environments look more grounded than this, their enemies looking more concrete than absurd. So unfortunately, Jumping Flash was forgotten as a platformer and as a first-person shooter. Despite Doom Fever being almost everywhere thanks to the PC version. PC. Crash is much more marketable to the West, while the absurdity of Jumping Flash's visuals aren't. Sony choosing money, as usual. As much as I'm fine with Bubsy 3D's visuals, level designs aside, Jumping Flash has the kind of visuals I prefer. It feels like a game I'd be playing in my dream. While Bubsy is just there. Seeing Bubsy mess with my TV. Jumping Flash is great though. Personally, I think LSD Dream Emulator was inspired by Jumping Flash's dreamlike setting, weaponizing the eeriness of the system's limitation in order to create something horrifying by making you walk into dreams, just witnessing whatever the LSD Dream Emulator throws at you. But was it the only one who used the PS1's limits to be scary? No, there was Silent Hill's Fog that created an eerie sense of heading into the unknown, while also rendering the environments at a stable frame rate. From Software is also here. Knight has been criticized for its character models being uncanny by the official PlayStation magazine. Wow, what makes them think it wasn't intentional? It's an horror game about going on an haunted ship, trying to scare you. Of course everyone looks creepy, but no, it's ugly. Imagine being aboard an haunted ship with ghosts and the first thing you think is like, hey, these don't look like real people enough. Gaming journalism. Some people even admire these ugly models and even think it makes the PS1 creepier. Foreshadowing. As for consoles, race for prettier graphics went on and on and on, exploiting every aspect of newer consoles. Meanwhile, indie devs such as Daisuke and Naonigai, whatever their name is, tried using simpler graphics to evoke a simpler time. I'd also say that the edgier aspects of certain Western cartoons made their way into 3D games. Very few 2D games truly tried being ugly due to the market being limited. Boogerman and Wordworm Jim were one of the exceptions, but with 3D, devs could experiment more with polygons, so Western game characters were as ugly as they wanted to be. Some of them can be grosser than others, but heck yeah, ugly games. Meanwhile, there were plenty of other corporations trying to show the graphics. Oh yeah, look at this model. A lot of these advanced graphics look outdated nowadays, but it's fascinating to go back to them when you care about the history of gaming. I find it fun to just play these weird, uncanny games. You just need to have very low expectations because god dang, these stinky models are so beautiful. While the graphical race was going on, the 2000s simply went on. But the 2010s started out fine, with Minecraft and New Meniki being the so few indie games to be popular. But the 2010s got an indie boom thanks to YouTube Let's Players.
Is that the bite of 87?
for better or worse. So games did not need to bother with the better graphics all the time. They just needed to be played by popular YouTubers. PC gaming started being popular, while consoles started stagnating a little bit, mostly due to better graphics costing more, so it was less dependent on the limitations of the console and more dependent on the budget. So it was no more about pushing the limits aside from first-party companies. So due to that, a lot more budget had to be allocated to bigger games, so low-budget titles vanished eventually. Sorry Chibi Robo, at the very least Xenoblade was remade. Oh god, I forgot about the Wii. Flashback. The Wii had an aesthetic of its own due to the limitations of the console. While everyone else was trying to be realistic, the Wii could not be that much realistic, so games had to add crazier art styles to distinguish themselves from each other, from the cel-shaded black, white, red, rounder, anime. The Wii had a diversity of art style, even more than the PS2 somehow. So how did Xenoblade look on the Wii? Oh, the thing about Xenoblade is that its scope is so gigantic, they needed to downgrade the model. Ugly compared to other Wii games it is. Either way, the content is still easily worth $50, including the invisible armor, so that I could sim for Dunban. Yes, I wasn't too Dunban. Shh. Aside from that, a lot of Wii titles age very well graphically, including the Mii's. Mii's have received some criticism, such as them being too basic, or that Wii Sports was just a tech demo. It was glossed over by many people, being considered ugly, but nowadays people are acclaiming its aesthetic, and I'm surprised. I never thought about these aesthetics, just considering Nintendo Wii's lineup could be the result of its limitations, so Wii titles are finally being appreciated for what they are. Still a bit surprising that it took that long, but you know how gamers are, worshipping the nostalgia. So where are we now? Sony is making big budget games only that push the limits of the PlayStation 5 Pro, while everyone else is doing whatever. We've reached our limits. Time to make games expensive for some reason. Art style has become even more important than ever, as in these are even more powerful than anyone expected. So what should we expect? Weaponized ugliness. Seriously. The thing that comes up on YouTube is that there are people who are like, this looks like a console graphics, but YouTube comments have a certain degree of anonymity, so they're often full of garbage. So in a culture where gamers keep being angry online due to an algorithm profiting off the hatred, devs kinda stop caring about it. If every game reveal is cringe, ugly, whatever, why not simply do whatever you want in the face of hundreds of angry internet users who will turn their attention to something else in a month? So if people are going to whine anyways, why not make what you want to make at this point? So boom, ugly games. PS1 games have been considered ugly for a while, unlike 2D games that have aged perfectly. So why not make ugly PS1 games again? While the 98 remake started the trend, others, like Haunted PS1, carried it, so let's go. But don't worry, before we get to the PS1 segment, I have something I want to show you. 500 Caliber Contracts is the angstiest third-person pew-pew game about destroying rich people's Minecraft servers. It looks like an early 3D PC game mixed with 3D platformers from 2003, and even has a Newgrounds flash cutscene. I'm not even talking about the character design. This looks like a DeviantArt OC from the early 2000s. Wait, maybe a Newgrounds OC. Stick fights with emo hair were popular in the 2000s. I love it. Surprisingly, the writing is very punkish. It takes work culture and rich people. It makes sense for a satire, and it's not subtle at all. It does not even need to be, because of how ugly it is. Even the warning screen feels like it came from a zine. 500 Caliber Contracts looks terrible, but the frame rate is fine, so I love it. Yes, the level design is kind of confusing, but shh. The DeviantArt Newgrounds aesthetic also reminds me of Tomorrow Is My Birthday. Last up before the PS1, I promise. It's a point-and-click adventure game about this teenager pedals running away with their friend Bias in the wild due to some reason. The title is a mix of photograph 2D how-to-draw manga art and actual live footage. The story has some neat world building with an horrifying twist or two in the endings. The game is designed to look like a mess, and since it is about a bunch of teenagers dealing with their emotions, the 2D art and photos don't always mix well, which works fine in this context. Easy recommendation because it's ugly, yet it's short. Now for the modern PS1 and 64 titles. The thing about this gen is that contrary to popular belief, I think quite a few titles have aged quite well due to their limitations becoming the art style. There's a reason why Banjo-Kazooie in Smash is based on the Yoshi iteration rather than the nuts and bolts thing, or why Conquer looks so good. My favorites are easily the Goemon 64 game. These designs look so simple yet work so well on the system, 10 out of 10. So a lot of modern low poly titles use those limitations mostly to create an art style, and gosh darn it, it is ugly sometimes. But due to that nostalgia, it feels like people exploit the art style to shock players and immerse them into horror. And seeing it unfold with less detailed graphics is horrifying sometimes. An Hungry Fly looks like a PS1 Tim Burton game. Somehow it is disgusting on purpose with the visuals it has, not talking about the designs that are seen from the first person view. An Hungry Fly is proud to be ugly and goes all the way for it. Pure putrid garbage I would consider great. There are also many other more traditional horror titles that keep a more realistic look, such as Elisa, So there's that. Even Sorry We're Closed uses this more traditional direction in a flashy way, but one thing that is still a bit missing has to be the ugly CG. I desperately want more uncanny CG, to the point where I'm willing to root for the meh Amanda the Adventurer. Love the visuals, but the writing is kinda predictable to the point where it's not too fun to watch. Archangel Nemesis is more my vibe. With its expressive models, mixed media aspects, and just flat out great writing, I don't even mind the episodic structure, nor that the character models look so similar to each other. It is the kind of early CG I need. Episode 3 and 4 are apparently cancelled, but it will be replaced by a dungeon crawling game with visual novel elements. I need it! Take your time, so we can play your masterpiece. I still think episode 1 and 2 are essential to play, so here's the premise. premise. V is an average kid who her parents send to some kind of church so that she can be experimented on. There's this big world building with slow pace, horror, etc. Play it now. Julian and Friends also does the early CG pretty well. As a point-and-click educational game that becomes an horror title, I definitely prefer this to Amanda due to the writing that executed well this kind of premise. If you're looking for a web series that uses this kind of CG, I'd recommend Cookie Trip. It's all an early CG spooky surrealism all the time. There's also plenty of lore for you to explore if you want to. And there's not much analog horror that uses CG on this site. Maybe ye old VHS tapes or Nebula and Cassar. Nebula and Cassar is an early PS2 game that never got released, where the channel Knaktube invites people to send any info about the game. So it's a collaborative project by many artists disguised as an RRG with multiple music tracks, tons of content, as well as a 2008 bloopers video. Do I think this one is a very creative project? Yes, it's just that with most web series, it doesn't really go anywhere right now. As it turns out, Knaktube is still pretty active. I just do be like that. At this point, I think quite a few low poly titles have inspired quite a few animators, such as Bunlit, who makes Whatever Whenever, and the Bloodborne card game. I feel like most of these animators are having the time of their lives. Alright, gaming. After the fairly generic Hungry Lamu, Hulu made an horror RPG called Sea Mongrel that has 3D monsters with 2D characters. It's so dang ugly, it's horrifying. The thing about monster design in JRPGs is that they get weird. So the contrast between 2D characters and the 3D monsters is great. That plus it's one of the rare horror themed JRPGs, which is much rarer than anything you'd expect. It sucks that there's none more of that, but Hulu made a bunch of more titles from the same universe. Hungry Lamu is probably the most generic of the bunch, but again, it's their first game. My first video is about a guy screaming garlic in French. Actually, I had a channel where I made a ton of AMVs before it was deleted in 2012, so I should have made reviews instead, in my opinion. Screw it, let's talk about Mummy Sandbot. It's probably the ugliest game I've ever seen, where you're a mummy and you do stuff. I don't know how to feel about this one. If you're into Minecraft, you'll probably love this one, especially at $3. Orbo's Odyssey looks super cute, but also ugly as heck. Mixed media aspect that works so well with the stupidity of Johnny's titles. We need to talk more about these titles. You know what? I like this more than the old AAA art direction. When I see something like that, I just don't care. Yes, I want to see what more powerful hardware can do about stuff. But look at LB60. Old school look, new school camera angles, controls, etc. Ugliness is an art style, and that art style has as much substance as anything released right now. Who cares about the weird X-Site or the angry YouTube children who invade the comment section? It's like if you gatekept someone from baking a cake because it doesn't have purple frosting. Bakery is a form of art as much as gaming, so screw everything and bake as many cakes as you want, you beautiful baker. The only reason why I did that was because someone wanted me to. I certainly hope they pay me. Thank you for watching and please like and subscribe. Bye!